We live in this incredibly connected world, right? We're constantly interacting with people from all sorts of different backgrounds. But here's the thing. Just because we're connected doesn't mean we're actually communicating. So today, we're going to talk about how to build some real, solid bridges of understanding.
Oh, you know that feeling. I'm sure you do. You say one thing, they hear something totally different, and all of a sudden it feels like you're on two separate planets. It happens all the time. But what if I told you it has almost nothing to do with vocabulary and everything to do with something much, much deeper? Okay, take a look at this. Simple, right? But depending on who you're talking to, the meaning is worlds apart. For a German colleague, saying a deal is difficult might be a huge red flag. It means it's probably impossible. But for an American, calling it a challenge actually sounds exciting, like an opportunity to win. It's the same situation, but a completely different reality based on one tiny word. And this is exactly what we're diving into. So what is this thing that keeps getting in our way? Well, you can think of it like an invisible wall. And that's what makes it so tricky. You can't see it, but you definitely feel it when you run into it. Here's the problem. As humans, we are wired to react to what's right in front of our eyes. The words people say, their tone, their body language. But all of that is just the surface level stuff. It's just the symptom. The real cause, the cultural programming that's driving those behaviors, is completely hidden. And that gap is where all the misunderstanding happens. So how do we start to see something that's invisible? Well, lucky for us, there's a fantastic mental model that helps us do exactly that. It helps us look beyond the surface. And here it is. Meet the cultural iceberg. It's such a powerful way to think about this. We all know that with a real iceberg, the tiny little tip you see above the water is nothing compared to the massive chunk of ice lurking underneath. Well, guess what? Culture works the exact same way. So let's break it down. Above the water, you've got the visible things, the behaviors, the words, the traditions. But below the surface, that's the massive invisible foundation. These are the core beliefs and values that shape and direct everything we see up top. And here's the most important part. If you're only paying attention to what's visible, you are literally missing about 90% of what's actually going on. Okay, so we've identified the problem. We can picture the iceberg. Now what do we do about it? How do we navigate these waters safely? Well, it's time to open up what I like to call the Bridge Builder's Toolkit. These are your 4 essential tools. First, and this is the big one, you have to suspend judgment. Why? Because your first gut reaction is almost always based on your culture, not theirs. Second, listen actively. And I don't mean just waiting for your turn to speak. I mean really trying to understand the meaning behind their words. Third, ask for clarity. It's so simple, but asking something like, hey, can you help me understand what you mean by that, is a total game changer. And finally, acknowledge intent. Assume good intentions, even if their delivery feels a little off to you. And this quote, it just perfectly captures that first tool. The biggest trap we fall into is assuming we already know what someone means, that we've got it all figured out. But suspending that illusion of knowledge, that's the absolute first step to making a real connection. All right, let's put this toolkit to the test. We're going to see how these tools work in a real-world scenario, focusing on one of the most common points of friction, the difference between direct and indirect communication. So, in some cultures, people value getting straight to the point. No fluff, just the facts. In other cultures, the priority is maintaining harmony, so people use more nuance and context to get their message across. Now, neither one of these is better than the other, but man, when they collide, sparks can fly. Just look at these examples. A direct communicator giving feedback might just say, your analysis is incorrect. But an indirect communicator might say, I have a few questions about your analysis. To an indirect person, the first one can sound harsh, maybe even rude. To a direct person, the second one can sound confusing and vague. The key isn't to judge one or the other, it's to learn how to translate. So why does all of this really matter? I mean, what's the big deal? In our last section, let's zoom out a bit and see the massive impact these skills can have in the real world. 85%. That is a huge number. What is it? Well, that's the staggering percentage of people working on global teams who say that miscommunication is their single biggest challenge. It gets in the way of progress and just creates friction. This isn't a nice-to-have skill anymore. It is absolutely fundamental to success today. And honestly, that is the most important takeaway here. This whole thing isn't just about damage control or trying to avoid arguments. When you learn to proactively understand and adapt your communication, you start building stronger, more creative, and more trusting relationships. You're not just avoiding problems, you're literally building bridges to new opportunities.
So as we finish up, I want to leave you with this question. It's not a matter of if you'll need these tools. It's a matter of where you'll use them first. Maybe it's with a coworker, a new client, or even a neighbor. So think about it. What bridge will you build first?